2nd, 2020, Pat Caploe Inductive Bible Study. So what we're going to look at today is the first two verses of Psalm 9. So just to let you know, I'm not going to do these inductive Bible study portions line by line. It's going to be topical just to get the pump primed and kind of get you on a good trajectory for doing inductive Bible study. So just as a reminder, these are questions that I'm asking myself all the time. As I said before, this card that I'm using as a guideline to help me make observations, that's where we start after praying, that's where we start after reading the passage and just looking at it and asking who are the players, who are the actors in this drama. And all the time, God is the lead role and the hero, the Almighty. Again, I used this card when I was studying Jeremiah, but we're just going to ask who's speaking, what the subject is, or who is the object, who is God speaking to, and are there any bad guys in this scene. Also start asking questions like what's happening, what do I see in this passage? Repeated ideas, phrases, making lists of repeated words. What is the emotion of the passage and the style of writing? Is it prophetic? Is it historical narrative? Is it songs like the Psalms? All right, and I'm looking for, again, repeated ideas and themes that run throughout the passage, and contrast, like good and bad, or old and new. Those kinds of things are good observations to make. They can spur our imagination led by the Spirit. When is all of this happening? What has happened before and after, and what could happen as a result of what's happening and when it happened? So when I have a brown marker, I use brown for places when I ask the where question. Where could be on earth, brown is, dirt is brown, so It could also be a spiritual place, all right? And asking the how question, how did these things happen? How did the author come to the place or the events reach their culmination in what's happening in the text itself? And then once I'm finished gathering all of these observations together, I ask, what is at the heart of it all? What does it mean to me, and what did it mean to the author and to the audience, the people who are hearing it read or reading it themselves? And then what is the application for me today? Because of all of these things, because of all of these observations and what it means, how can I listen to God's voice and direction and do it and obey? Okay, so I picked Psalm 9, the first couple verses, because it's pretty obvious some of the things that are happening here, but I'm just going to go ahead and start approaching it. And I got my colored markers here. It helps to have colored markers, I think. And you're going to see me using symbols and colors and such. It's so to answer the first question, we'll ask who is the author. Okay, unfortunately for us, it's written in the little text above the psalm there. And I use blue because I'm asking who, and who rhymes with blue. That's how my mind works. So David is the author. So over here, I see the pronoun I. All right, and I'm just going to highlight those. And that reminds me that it's David that's writing this, King David. So I brought this chart that I keep with me, and King David is right here. He was king of Israel from about 1010 to 970 when Solomon became king, his son Solomon. And David is in Jerusalem most of his life. But there's also a short period of time when he's in Hebron. A little bit small, but that's what that says right there. Alright, so David is writing this psalm, and the first thing he does is say, I will. So, why is that important? I will. Just going to highlight this. Now you can start to see, in case you hadn't noticed, there's that repeated phrase. So, why does David repeat this phrase? Well, I think it's because sometimes our soul, our mind, is easily distracted and we get our focus in the wrong place. And so David, as you'll see in other Psalms, has a habit of talking to his soul. Why so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God. So I think by sheer act of will, of course being led by God's Spirit and loving God and looking to Him for help, but sometimes we have to make an effort. Our relationship with God doesn't depend on anything that we do to accomplish salvation, but I think sometimes we need to actually make the effort to seek God. So I'm going to just say, demands effort. We can't just sit in our room by ourselves and pray a little bit and really expect to have a deeper relationship with God. We have to, of course, pray, as I said at the beginning of the video, and then, of course, when the distracting thoughts or events come clawing at us for attention, we have to make some effort to get some traction in our relationship with God. And it just takes a couple minutes to pray and ask God for help. And He's never failed me yet. So, again, salvation does not depend on our efforts, but we do have to play a role in this relationship that we have. And when we do, it kind of makes a big change. It does make a big change. Okay, let's look at a few things, other things here. What is the first thing he says? I will give thanks. He says, I will give thanks. Now, I think that's a very important part of having a relationship with God. Giving thanks. And you're going to see in a second why that's kind of important. It is important. And if you stop and think about it, as I said in the introduction, we have a lot to be grateful for. Alright, so who is he giving thanks to? He's giving thanks to the Lord. Who is the Lord? He's the maker of heaven and earth. As we talked about yesterday, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He's pretty good and kind and loving and powerful to want a relationship with us in spite of our weaknesses and our sins. He made a whole world and an afterlife for us to enjoy. So he understands the importance of taking the time to focus on God and to give thanks to the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Remember, David could only hope for Jesus in the future, the final King of Kings. But in this time, in this day, he gave thanks to the Lord, the Almighty, to the best of his understanding. And that's what we all need to do, because nobody knows it all, and we can all learn something from giving thanks to the Lord. We can learn more about God. God is not boring. He is life, and our next breath comes from him. That's the Lord. To me, and I think to David. So, he doesn't just stop there. He says, I will give thanks with all my heart. With how much? I'm asking the how question. How much? And I think you can see it's all. All my heart. And whenever I see heart, or I think there's an emotional component, I make a little heart there. One thing that I also do is I use my purple marker and make a triangle over Lord. Now, let's take a look at the second line here. I hope this helps. This is fun to me, because I get to color and I get to make observations, and then I get to ask God, how can I apply some small little piece of this in my life today so that I can be a blessing to others, and mainly to the Lord, but yeah, to others. Okay, I will give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. I will tell of all thy wonders. So, a person can pray quietly, whispering to the Lord. I think the important thing is we need to speak out. We need to speak out. This is supposed to be lips. I don't know how much that looks like lips, but my marker has kind of a dull tip, so. I will tell of how many of his wonders? Just one, maybe, I don't know. Something happened a long time ago, no. He is telling of all his wonders. There's a repeated word. All. So I'm going to make a little list here. All. And then I'm going to make some little hash marks. Alright, so he says all twice. I will give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. I will tell of all thy wonders. Why is it important to speak of God's wonders? Well, I think it's important because when we say it, we're saying it to God in thanks, but we're also saying it out loud so that our ears can hear of his wonders. So when we say something, we're not only saying it, but we're hearing it. And when we hear it, it's kind of like giving inertia to the process of being grateful. And let's go back to thanks for a second. This all started with giving thanks. And now he's giving thanks with his mouth and telling of God's wonders. What are some of the wonders? Well, the big one, I think, is salvation. In Jesus, for me, try to keep my lists separate here. Let's go to the next line. Well, for David, it was giving thanks with all his heart to the Lord, remembering what God has done. The Lord as he knew him. I will be glad and exult in thee. So, being glad and exulting. In thee. Okay, so there's your New American Standard Version. I usually use the New Revised Standard Version, but I will be glad and I will exult in thee. I sometimes like to take that first part of the sentence and put it right by the second part of the sentence. So, you might want to look up the word exult, and I think, if I remember right, it's kind of an exuberant, energetic method of expressing joy or gladness. Almost a synonymous thing. Being glad. It's hard to be glad and just kind of sit there like a lump, but you know, at some point your salvation has to reach the lower half of your face and you smile. It's one way to look at it, at the very least. And then sometimes your feet start moving and you start jumping and clapping, or just clapping, whatever you're capable of doing. If a person, you know, as much as a person is able to be glad and to exult in thee. And of course, that's sort of a proper name or pronoun for the Lord. And then this next part, the last line, this is just 2 verses, mind you. All these things I'm seeing here. I will sing praise to thy name. So, how do you sing praise? With your mouth. I will sing praise to thy name, O Most High. So, whenever I hear this phrase, thy name, I think about something that is of value. To put it in modern terms, let's talk about Mercedes. When I say the word Mercedes, I'm certain things come to your mind. Ferrari. These are just examples. I'm not saying anything except that when I think of God's name, I think of something of immense value, the most value. Why? What comes to mind when I think of Ferrari or Lamborghini, Bugatti, Veyron? This is an intensely engineered piece of machinery. It has value because so much care has gone into its production. Well, we know God is God, eternal. Nobody's created him. But when we think of the names of those companies, Ferrari, Bugatti, there's a certain character to them. Not only are they expensive and valuable, but they're intricate in their detail and carefully constructed. Now, obviously, we can't apply that same sort of reasoning completely to God because he's uncreated. But his name, his character, and what is his character like? As I started off with, he is holy, he is good, he is kind, he's loving. Everything that you can imagine that is good and sweet and loving and fatherly to care for us and help us to grow. As he never gives up, he's faithful. So that's 2 verses. I want to just jump back here to where I started. How did all of these things come out of David's life? He started with thanksgiving. And that, I think, is the key for this psalm. I'm just going to call it thanks. Produces good fruit. And you'll notice that the purpose of a tree is to create fruit. The fruit never eats its own fruit. I mean, the tree never eats its own fruit. It's for others. But in our case, we're double blessed. We get to enjoy the fruit of a thankful heart with God. So I hope that you take this and apply this. It's a small thing, but just by looking at Psalm 9 in the first couple verses, summing it up, I can give thanks. This is David writing this, but I can do all of these things. I can give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. Don't get hung up wondering, am I doing this with my whole heart? Just start with a part by giving thanks. And like a muscle, the more you exercise that thanksgiving muscle, the stronger it gets. And pretty soon, you'll find yourself giving thanks with more and more of your heart. And then when you find yourself in a situation where it just seems like you're swimming upstream, everything's against you, you can remember by giving thanks what God's character is like and all of his wonders. And remember, if he never did anything else for us ever again, it's enough that he already gave us Jesus. He covers it all. He blesses us every day. And I hope you're blessed today as you consider these things. God bless.